Greetings everyone, this is Germane. We are going to continue our exploration of galactic history through the use of the Galactic Heritage Cards. It is our hope that you have watched the first installment, which gives the background information for the beginning of this journey that we're going to make. Because now we are going to journey through cards 3, 4, 5, and 6. The last video was cards 1 and 2. Alright, so for those of you who have perhaps used the Galactic Heritage Cards, you know that the next civilization that is expressed through the cards is the civilization or the archetype, let's say, that is connected with the Andromedan galaxy. Now, of course, the question might be, well, Germane, if you are exploring galactic heritage for this galaxy, why are you including Andromeda? Well, in order to answer that question, then, we have to, in a sense, zoom out and look at the bigger perspective. Now, this is something we've not necessarily talked about in the past, so this is one of the first times we are discussing it. You're going to see here that we've drawn what you might call an infinity symbol. Now, as you know, the reality paradigm that you are all experiencing is one of polarity. And you're going to see this from the micro level to the macro level. So this is why we've said that we're going to zoom out a little bit more. Generally speaking, you're going to find that galaxies have counterparts, like brother and sister energies. So if we are to look at the plus sign as being masculine energy, that would be representative of your galactic archetype. Then, if we go to its opposite, which we've written the minus symbol, that would represent more of a feminine expression, and that would be where the Andromedan galaxy connects with yours. So together, you balance each other through these different positive and negative energies. Now, please understand that we are speaking generally and we're speaking in archetype, all right? We're looking at it from the zoomed out perspective and from the balancing of the energy of duality. So overall then, in your galactic family here in this galaxy, the expression has very much been more of a male expression in the predominance of energy. But what you're going to find with the Andromedan galaxy is the predominance of expression is more what you might label to be feminine in nature. So the reason why we've included the Andromedan energy then in the exploration of the cards and in the exploration of your galactic heritage is because that in order to see yourself, it's often very valuable to see an opposite reflection, to see contrast, because then you can see yourself. So this is one of the reasons why we've included the Andromedan energy in this journey of exploring your galactic heritage. And also, as many of you watching this video know, many people feel a strong connection with the Andromedan galaxy and its energy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But many of you who are artists, even perhaps sacred geometrists, those who work with templates and light language and more fluid ways of working with energy, you might find that strong connection with the Andromedan energy. So we're going to start then with card number 3 of the deck, Andromedan energy, And the theme of this card is change. Okay, what do we mean by that? Well, obviously, you know what the word change means. And as most of you have come to know, change in that sense is the only constant. However, the paradigm from which most beings in your galactic structure operate is that they resist change, and instead they cling to what is familiar. So the opposite energy of that, of course, then, is to begin to express or embrace change. Now, those of you who have read the description that we've given, very, very brief description of the Andromedan energy, you've heard us give a metaphor. Now, please know this is not necessarily literal. It's more to express the nature of Andromedan consciousness. We'll repeat the metaphor here. So, in your world now, the way you've come to identify and anchor yourself in reality is through the perception of familiarity or the perception of linearity. So, for instance, in the morning, if you are walking on the street to work, every morning you might see the same coffee shop, the same subway entrance, the same street signs, etc. And those familiar signposts help to anchor you in this time space. Okay, so if there is a change to that pattern, let's say a really dramatic change, you would then experience some disorientation until you reoriented yourself to the new paradigm. Okay, so imagine for a moment then a totally different type of reality in which, if you were walking to work every day, what was a coffee shop yesterday is now a tree. And what was the subway entrance the previous day is now a, let's say, parking lot. And thus, things from moment to moment to moment are very, very fluid, and they keep changing. So how then can you navigate through your reality? Navigation then becomes much more internally focused, which is more of a feminine expression. So now you can see the masculine tendency is the resistance of change. The feminine tendency, much like water, is the embracing of change, the moving with the flow of change. And that is much more of the expression of the Andromedan energy. So if you are working with the cards and you receive this card of change in a reading, again, depending on your circumstances, it would have to do with either you are a message that you are resisting change, that you need to embrace more change, or that change is coming and for you to navigate it more cleanly is to embrace it and move with the flow. Once again, as we said in the other installment of this video series, is that intuitively speaking, when you're working with the cards, that is the number one thing to focus on, is your own intuition. Because there might be card meanings written in the book, and even what we're saying here might give you some guidance, but as you tap into your own intuition in working with the cards, then the meaning interfaces with your own intuition, and a clearer understanding begins to unfold. Okay, so that's card number 3, change. Now, let's go back to the metaphor we gave you of walking on the street and your reality is very fluid and things are constantly changing. So the human person faced with that kind of challenge, what would be the first thing they experience? It would be confusion, yes? So that brings us to card number 4. The theme, it's still Andromeda, the theme is confusion, and it's referring to that initial reaction when faced with change. Now, we're not necessarily talking about small changes, but big enough changes that shake the fabric of familiarity. So it's an opportunity then, when faced with this type of confusion, to go within, to tap more into your inner, you might want to call it feminine energy, or energy of fluidity, to learn how to navigate through those unfamiliar circumstances from an internal place rather than an external place. And as you do, the confusion begins to evaporate. Confusion is also sometimes the result of the resistance to change. So if you are receiving this card in a reading, the card of confusion, it's usually meaning that you are in the process of changing from one mode of being to another. It could be the changing of belief systems from one to another. It could be the change of external circumstances. And there is most likely a little bit of resistance, or the feeling of, let's say, floating in space without an anchor, not knowing what direction to move into. Though the human ego considers confusion to be something bad or something negative, we do not see it that way. We see it as a really good signpost that you are unlocking from one reality, moving into another reality. So it's almost like a null zone where anything is possible, where direction can be changed, and you can move into another timeline or another parallel, if you wish. So it can be, should you choose to embrace it that way, a time and place of power from which you can make radical change. So look for that in your readings if it comes up. Do not be concerned if you're feeling that confusion. What we would ask you to do is not to hide under the rock or the turtle going back into the shell. It's important in those times of confusion that you don't go back into self-protection. All right, so that's a little bit of a different understanding of the Andromedan energy and how its fluidity and its unfamiliarity can create or trigger responses in humans. So now we move to number 5, again, Andromeda card, and this theme is fluidity. So we've mentioned fluidity just now. And we were talking about, again, how, using the metaphor, as you are exposed to change, that if you grip and if you resist the change, then there's no movement. And it actually can create a lot of pain and a lot of feeling of being stuck and frustration. So when you let go to the change and you flow with it, as we said, card number 4, you might experience confusion, but you will be in the flow of this fluidity, which is the feminine energy. And as you allow yourself to surrender in that way to the flow, then it will naturally bring you toward the experience that you next need to have, that the universe is really flowing you toward. So the fluidity experience can be a very frightening one, because for many people it feels very vulnerable. It feels as if they could drown in any moment. It also has to do with emotion as well, because part of moving with the flow of the energy in your reality is also moving with the flow of your emotional body as well, because the resistance and the gripping comes from fear. And when you are empowering fear, things get stuck, things go to a standstill. But when you're moving into the fluidity, not only through your reality, but also within the emotional body as well, you're going to find transformation can happen much more quickly and with much more ease and in a less painful way. though of course we know for humans this can sometimes be a very difficult thing because you don't want to feel your emotions. You would rather push them down and instead try to control reality. So the lesson from the Andromedan consciousness at this time is to let go of control, to surrender to the flow, and to continue to move to where you need to go, which brings us to the last card then. The last card in the Andromeda series is card number 6, and the theme is New Paradigm. So let's look at the progression here then. Change can lead to confusion, and when you allow yourself to surrender to the confusion, you move into the fluidity. And where does the fluidity take you? It takes you here to a new paradigm. So if this card is coming up in your reading, then it is a message that there is an opportunity for you to move into a new paradigm. This might be a new paradigm of thought, so it might be something internal. It might also be a new paradigm of how to work with the emotional body. But it might also be a new paradigm that's expressing itself in your physical life as well. So it can be on many different levels. But if the card is coming up, it is kind of like that message saying to you, a new paradigm is on the horizon. If you want to go through that door, step forward. And as we've given you the signposts, if you will, on the map toward embracing a new paradigm, the change, the confusion, the fluidity, and finally the breaking through to a new paradigm, then at least you have that understanding or familiar understanding about where it can lead. So at this point in time, we have, through this channel, done hundreds of readings with clients all over the world using the cards, and we've found various patterns in terms of what cards come up the most frequently. And we found actually the Andromedan cards don't really come up that often, or they come up at crucial times when people are making major shifts in their consciousness and thus in their life. So if these cards are coming up for you, it's really a message for you to pay attention to. Now also for those of you who are channels or healers or who work with star energy in different capacities, you will find that if you do tap into Andromedan energy, that it has a different flavor than the energies of the standard galactic family that you're aware of, such as Pleiades and Sirius, etc. It's very difficult to describe, but if you've connected with the energy, you will know. So, for instance, we're kind of not telling a secret here, but the man who created the artwork for these cards, David Cao from Hong Kong, he has a very, very strong Andromedan connection. And this allows him to possess a very different type of consciousness that can very often operate multidimensionally, even within a human body in this life. So consequentially then, he is a photographer, a film director, an artist, etc., because that is the way the Andromedan energy, in its fluidity, in its non-structured paradigm, has to express itself through him. So you're going to find then artists and new thought pioneers very often will have this Andromedan connection. So now you can see why we've included it in the deck, because it's a contrast. And ultimately speaking, as we've said many times, your pathway of integration as you are working with the other selves that are part of the galactic hologram, they lead to the center point here, which is the integration point of the two dualities. And that's a story for another time. And actually, Lyssa's husband, Ronald, talks a lot about that from the point of view of consciousness. So look for him to talk more about that. But in general, we want to just say that you are, even though you are journeying now in your galaxy, which has a little bit more of a masculine flavor, the integration process that you are experiencing as you are evolving yourselves eventually leads to the center point, which you could say is a black hole, where all energy, all consciousness comes into integration, and this duality model no longer exists. It exists simply for convenience, for your journey, as a way to understand the journey, but the true you exists at the center point, which is completely one consciousness of all creation itself. So then, the next installment of this series, we are going to move into the Arcturus consciousness. So please keep an eye out for that video. In the meantime, we invite you to take your deck, take out the Andromedan cards, perhaps put them on your altar or meditate with one or all of them to see if you can connect with that energy of your own inner fluidity and see what happens. Don't be surprised at what can happen. All right, thank you for your interest, and we will see you next time. Much love.